indicated to the country that we intended to increase the national minimum wage and the sectoral wage for security guards. I say intended because the legislation, the Minimum Wage Act, stipulates that there is a notice of intent to increase the national minimum wage, or to set a national minimum wage. And so that was published on April the 18th, and the 40-day period expired on May the 27th. We received a number of objections, and that period allows for objections to be made and submitted to the Minimum Wage Board. The Minimum Wage Board at 2 meetings examined all of the objections. Those objections fell in a number of categories. There were those who are of the view that the wage as proposed in the draft order is too low. There are those who believe that more time was needed. There are those who believe that the impact, the overall impact economically, is going to be negative. The Minimum Wage Board has examined all of the submissions, all of the objections, and the board submitted a report to the cabinet. The cabinet made a decision today to continue with the introduction of the increase in the national minimum wage, so that from June the 1st, the national minimum wage will be $10.50 across the board, with a sectoral minimum wage of $11.43. Now, the overtime rate and the double time rate follows from the 10.50 and the 11.43. A proposal from the board, a recommendation from the Minimum Wage Board that we have agreed to, is that for persons, particularly young people, but persons generally, who are part of a structured program, apprenticeship, work experience program, will be paid at a rate of 85% of the minimum wage. 85% of the minimum wage. And we agreed that that made sense. There are some stipulations. It must be, well, the categories that it must fulfill, the boxes that it must tick. An obligatory internship, so one that is part of a program, a voluntary internship but not exceeding 3 months, or job attachment or work experience program not exceeding 3 months in total. Now, those stipulations were put in because both the Minimum Wage Board and the Cabinet would want to be sure that there is no exploitation of this as a method of having reduced rates. So the Minimum Wage Board was quite clear as to the fact that these were some additional measures that needed to be put in place, conditions, to make sure that we did not have that issue. Now, Cabinet is conscious of the fact that the increase in the minimum wage has some impacts. It increases costs to businesses. We are also aware that some prices have been increasing. You would recall that we introduced the national minimum wage in 2021, and we indicated then that we would address it 1 year later. That is to say, the wage really should have increased about 3 years ago. It was not increased, it's been increased now. As a cabinet, we are conscious of the fact that the workers have been holding strain over these past 4 years. And well, over the last 3 is probably what it would be more accurate to say. And so we recognize that even though there will be impacts to employing organizations, to businesses, and we are sensitive to those impacts, we remain of the view that the increase is reasonable, that the increase is timely. The matter of the period of time given with respect to the notice, I'd like to remind us that the 40-day period is a period that is in the legislation. The period cannot be any less than 40 days. Of course, it could be more, but 40 days is the time period that we have been using ever since the legislation was enacted in the previous administration. And so that is the time period that we have used. And Cabinet's decision today means that from June the 1st, the national minimum wage in Barbados will be $10.50 for all categories except security officers, security guards. And for security guards, that rate will be $11.40 per hour. Now, we should indicate that the minimum wage is expressed in dollars per hour. I'd want to suggest, and I'm using this opportunity to suggest and to encourage employers to recognize the rate that workers have been bearing over the past at least 3 years, because it was 1 year and then 3 years after when we said we would have revisited. Workers have been bearing some weight. We do not want employers to go the route of reducing hours of work. Cabinet has not gone the route of establishing a national minimum wage per week. And we do not want to go in that direction necessarily. But of course, that really depends on the reaction coming to the establishment of the new rate, the 1050 and the 1143. As a cabinet, as a group that represents the entire country, workers, employers, unemployed, everybody, we are conscious of all the various impacts. We are very clear that people have to be able to eat, they have to be able to look after their dependents.